And now, allow me to write a haiku, nay, a sonnet, nay, a soliloquy, for the incredible, beautiful brilliance that is William Andrew Solace. Hi everybody, Carla here. It's been a while, but I finally have something to talk about, which is good. And guess what? This is actually my 100th episode of the Talks from Freaking Narnia vlog series, which is insane. I mean, I've done a bunch of like extra stuff and like weird announcement videos at points, but this is the 100th actual full-length episode that I've done. And I'm super excited to finally get to this because I've been counting. I've been counting them from the beginning, and it's been like, will I actually get to 100? I don't know. Nothing's happening, so maybe I'll never get there. But I did, and I hope the pandemic is treating you guys well wherever you are. I know things are getting kind of dicey in some places where we thought that it was going to, last longer with some semblance of normality at least. Over here things are okay still. I don't know if you've heard about Australia, but Melbourne had, like Victoria, the whole state had a bit of a resurgence. A bit is an understatement. It was a big peak, and they've been in lockdown for a long while, few weeks for sure, and it's starting to go down. It seems like it's gone down already. But, no one's just resting on their laurels, pun intended. Everybody here is still being careful. All the governments, the state governments are being careful, thankfully. So, fingers crossed that we don't see a resurgence of the virus. I hope wherever you are, you're safe. I know Europe is getting hit pretty hard right now. The United States seems to be on its way up again. Let's not talk about that too much. I do enough of that on Twitter, I guess. But I hope you guys are being safe, trying to stay home as much as you possibly can, going to the doctor if you have any symptoms. Just be careful, guys. This isn't a game. So since the situation eventually did give me the opportunity to do this 100th video episode, I think it's actually kind of fitting that I talk about something that is very dear to my heart. And you look at you browse through my past videos and you'll see like there's a lot of like Stranger Things, there's a lot of anime, and I haven't done any book reviews in a while, but obviously books are a big part of my life. And one of the series that has been the biggest part of my life for like way over a decade now is the Percy Jackson series. Just a few weeks ago, the last book, and I'm putting that in quotes because we'll talk about that later, but the last book in the Riordan-verse series, Camp Half-Blood series, however you want to call it, what's being billed as the last book in the series, came out, and it's of course the last book in the Trials of Apollo series, which is The Tower of NERO. I have liked the Trials of Apollo series a lot. I actually really enjoy it. I know people, for the most part, don't necessarily think it's as good as the previous ones. Most people tend to keep the Percy Jackson series as the top, like that one was the best for them. I don't feel that way for some reason. Like I like the Percy Jackson series just as much as the next guy. It was what got me into these books, into Rick Riordan's books. But for me, I liked the Heroes of Olympus a lot better. I like that it had more characters, it had more points of view, it incorporated both Greek and Roman mythology, which I really enjoyed. So for me, Heroes of Olympus is sort of always at the top. Percy Jackson is it's okay. I love Percy's stories, but I can't really use as an excuse the idea that I was younger back then, because I wasn't that young. I was in my 20s when I actually read the Percy Jackson series, so like it's not like I was a kid back then, so it seemed more impressive or anything. I liked the Percy Jackson series just as well. It was what introduced me to these characters, and I love it. I will always love it for that reason. But I think my attachment to the Percy Jackson series has a lot to do with nostalgia, I guess. But my favorite has always been the Heroes of Olympus series, and the Trials of Apollo had its ups and downs, I guess. Some chapters I really liked. Some chapters I can barely remember. But when it's strong, it's really strong. And I've been enjoying it a lot so far, mostly because I love Apollo. I've always loved Apollo since the first, time he made his appearance in the Percy Jackson series. I just love him. He's such a hilarious character, and I like that he went through the trials. It makes sense. It's a thing that happens in mythology. So I've been enjoying it, and I've been enjoying just this whole idea of a god coming to learn a lesson from mortals, and why things that are important to mortals are important, even if as a god your perspective is different. I really enjoyed that, and I think Rick has done that really well, because a lot of his other characters don't have as clear an arc to get through as Apollo did. Because, Percy, stuff happened to Percy, more or less, and stuff happens to the demigods, more or less. But they are generally good kids, they're not like, they don't have to change their entire mentality through the 5 books of a series. Apollo did. Like, he became a completely different person, and I really enjoyed that from this series. So I don't put down the Trials of Apollo series just because it's the last of a series that I've loved. I still feel like I like the Heroes of Olympus better, just because we got to be in the heads of so many different characters, and I really enjoyed that. But the Trials of Apollo is really good. It's really fun. It's been super just interesting to be inside Apollo's mind for this long, and to see him grow up as a character, and to see him change from God, like somebody who's so far above everyone that he can't relate, to somebody who can relate and who understands why humans are the way they act. And I think that's been really good. As for this particular book though, just this one, I really enjoyed it, actually. It's still not my favorite of the series. Yeah, I think probably The Burning Maze is still my favorite in the series, just because the stakes were so much higher. And I think that book is where everything really became real. Like, that's where these books became real. That there are stakes, there are things that can happen that are going to hurt us so bad, but they have to happen. You know what I'm talking about. So I like it, and I think that was my favorite. Also, just the Hidden Oracle, it would be my second favorite probably, because I felt so happy going back to Camp Half-Blood. I love the Apollo kids so much. That book just made my life. But because of those same reasons, I also like this one a lot. You give me any book with Will and Nico in it, and I'm gonna be happy, basically. So yeah, I really like this. I liked that it felt noticeably different from the first book in the series. It felt like there was a progression, not just in Apollo's character, but everybody around him, and you could feel that in this book. I like the characters. I really enjoyed it. I think this is one of the better ones. The other two that I haven't mentioned probably didn't make as much of an impact on me. I liked them well enough, but I didn't hate them or anything, but when you ask me about this series, I will probably go straight to Burning Maze, Hidden Article, and then this, because those are the ones that actually made an impact on me and will stick in my mind. So let's talk about this book a little bit. And before I say anything, I do want to warn you that there will be spoilers. So, you know, I'm not holding back. I'm going to be reading from this book. I'm going to be talking about the ending of the book, like the very, very ending, and speculation as to what's going to happen next, supposedly. So yeah, you've been warned. There will be spoilers. If you haven't read it yet, go buy it. It's a pretty quick read, honestly. Like the text is actually like super big. Like it seems like a lot of pages, but it's a big text book for some reason. So, you know, go read it and then come back and watch this, because yeah, I'm gonna be discussing everything.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger! No, Will Robinson! Danger!
So, that said, I want to start, before I go into the actual book, I just want to take a second to mention the dedication, because that hit me like straight away. Have you ever known you're going to love a book from the dedication alone? Because that happened to me. Can I just this Rick dedicated it to his wife, whom, like, can I just say before I read it, Becky Riordan is awesome. She actually runs the at Camp Half-Blood user on Twitter. Like, that's her. Rick has now moved to the Rick Riordan username on Twitter. So now they're both on. And Becky is awesome. She's actually going to be, along with Rick, she's going to be a producer for all the upcoming TV adaptations and movie adaptations that they've got coming up for their properties, for Rick's properties. And I think it's great. I think Becky is awesome. I think none of this series would have been ever written without Becky there. She's got a handle on the fandom. She knows us, she loves us, and we love her right back. And Becky Riordan, just thank you for everything, and I'm so glad that Rick actually dedicated this to you, because you deserve it, lady. So the dedication is just to Becky. Every journey leads me home to you. Which, oh, how adorable are they? I love them. They're so cute. So yeah, from the dedication alone, I was like, you know? So that's saying something. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the pace and the rating. I feel that this book moved pretty fluidly from scene to scene. Like, there was never a point where I found myself bored. Though admittedly, you know, when it was just Apollo himself by himself, or Apollo with Meg, I tended to like not highlight as much. Like, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this. I probably have, but I highlight my books. I know you're now threatening to kill me because I'm obviously a monster, but I highlight my favorite passages in the book. And when it was Apollo by himself, or you know, Apollo and Meg, I sort of tended not to highlight as much stuff, mostly because those were like really serious moments, and I like the funny ones. And even though they were very emotional, they weren't like specific lines that I liked. So I would find myself like for long stretches of the book not highlighting anything, but that didn't necessarily mean that I didn't like it or that I felt bored. I just was really into it and had to keep going as I read. And also it also has to do with the fact that I'm a sucker for Will and Nico. So like whenever they were around, I became immediately more emotionally invested. And I was basically like highlighting every time they spoke. Every time they stood next to each other, every time they just acknowledged each other in any way, I was highlighting. So yeah, that says a lot. But I think this book was actually very well balanced. And at no point did I find myself like reading slower or anything. I chugged through it like for like 3 chapters a day. every day, and that was me pacing myself, of course, but like I did it really fast, and I think the pace was really good for this book. Also, it was just funny. Like, Rick's books are always funny, but this one just had me laughing so much, and that's saying a lot because it was a lot more emotional as well. Like, there was a lot of emotion in this book. A lot of Apollo sort of just thinking to himself and internalizing everything that he was learning, which was good. But interspersed in that, there were like a lot of funny things that I really, really loved. So yeah, I really enjoyed that in this book, and I enjoyed that in this series in general as well, because the first two, I mean, Percy's always funny, so the Percy Jackson series was funny, and the Heroes of Olympus had its funny moments as well, especially when like Leo or Frank were around. They were just hilarious most of the time. But there's something about Apollo as a character and as a narrator that I just really enjoy, because I already thought Apollo was funny back when he was a god, and he was funny because his sense of humor is so, like, he's so arrogant, right? That's his thing. He's basically like a giant douchebag frat boy. That's who he is, right? And that made him funny. But now that he became Lester, his humor became a lot more self-deprecating, and that's more my jam, I think. And it makes me so amused. I really like Rick's humor in this series, and I think it works better precisely because of who the narrator is. And I think this book was really funny, and it did have a great balance of like funny versus emotional moments. I mean, my favorite, like the funniest scene for me is just that scene where Nero can't find the right remote control for the Greek fire. I felt that in my soul. It's so relatable. Who would have thought I would ever relate to Nero? But nope, there it is. Oh god, hashtag millennial problems. Anyway, I love that scene. It was so funny. Rick reads fan fiction, a thread, or a list really. This is a video after all. Anyway, these are the moments where I was reading the book and I was just completely, absolutely convinced that Rick had been either reading fan fiction or looking at fan art of some kind, like, and these things were inspired by that. One, Nico speaking Italian, because we've all, like, ever since Nico was introduced, we have all, like, the fandom has all just made it a thing that Nico can actually speak Italian. And Rick seemed to sort of be resisting it. You could kind of tell because he's been asked this stuff, and he's like, well, yeah, but Nico, you know, he bathed in the Leith and he forgot his childhood, so maybe he doesn't speak Italian, right? No, he had to add it. He had to add it because the fandom is king, basically. And we all know that Nico would totally speak Italian. Now he did add the caveat that it's only when he's like really upset that his brain sort of slips and goes into Italian, which I'm down with. I'm down with that. I can live with that. I also don't, like, I'm not a fan of fangirl languages, like, you know, just inserting random foreign languages into an English speaking, you know, piece of fiction just because you can. I don't like it. I don't think people talk like that in real life most of the time. So I try to avoid it. It kind of annoyed me a little bit with Leo too, with like the Spanish thing. It was toned down after a while, so that's good. So I don't like want Nico to be like completely speaking Italian out of the blue either. So I'm good with it being like a little bit. So, but I'm glad that Rick gave us that because he totally got that from fanfiction. You know, that it is what it is. Also, Will having a sun tattoo, because that is a very prevalent thing in fan art. So just saying. Will giving Nico nicknames. I wish he had done this more, but I like that it's sort of confirmed now that Will just latches onto nicknames for Nico. I like that. This one, it was when he said that he was going to call him Debbie Downer from now on. Totally okay. I'm good with that. I wrote that in one of my fanfics, that he just kept giving Nico like different nicknames every 2 minutes. And I love that. I mean, obviously I don't think my take on it is exactly what Rick was thinking, because mine, it was like more nicknames, like more varied nicknames, and we didn't see as much of that here, but I like that it's a possibility. Also, Will Glows! Will Glows! That is totally a thing in both fanfic and fanart, and it is amazing that that Rick included it. And I'm so happy because I love Will. I don't know if you can tell just from my intro, but I love Will so much. I will talk more about Will later, but I'm really happy that he has his thing, you know, his one thing that he can do, because even with the healing, yeah, he's the best at it, but he's not the only one who can heal, right? So like, I like this, that he has like his thing, and I am totally like, as soon as I'm done editing this video, I am totally writing a fanfic about Will glowing. That is all. Just, you've been warned. Check, you know, stay tuned to my fanfiction outlets, and you will see. Also, Annabeth going to both NERO and a Muggle university, and, you know, Percy studying something to do with water, because of course, because that's been a fandom headcanon thing for like ages, so that's obvious. And of course, Piper being not straight, which makes complete sense, and really all it needed was to be confirmed, and so thank you, Rick, for doing that, because duh. Now let's talk a little bit about the characters. I like Lou. I won't even attempt to try to pronounce her actual full name, but I like Lou. It's funny because I was a lot more like Apollo. I had like Apollo's mentality as far as Lou is concerned, like, okay, I like that you're helping them at this point, but also, why did you not do anything to help Meg like years ago? Like, because it really bothers me when adults see children suffering and do nothing, and are like, I can't do anything, it's out of my hands. I don't think that's right. So that really bugged me, and I liked that it bugged Apollo as well. Because I'm like, yes, exactly, somebody needs to point this out. But in the end, Lou actually turned out to be a good person for the most part. She just, you know, didn't know how to handle the situation, I guess, and Meg forgave her for it for the most part. And she did help them in the end, and she basically saved them, so it was nice to see, and that she did the right thing in the end, even if it took her forever. It's nice to have another grown-up on Meg's side. I'm counting Lester as a grown-up there for some reason, but yeah, it's nice to have a grown-up on Meg's side, even if it took her a hell of a long time to actually do something about it, but, you know, eventually she did, so that's what matters to me. NERO was actually better than I expected, and it's funny because NERO was always set up to be like the big bad, I guess. I mean, Python, but like out of the triumvirate, NERO was supposed to be the big one, right? And it's a bit weird because these three were actual historical figures. We know more about them than we would from, say, the gods, the mythical gods, the Titans. Certainly more than the Titans. So they felt a lot more real to me this time. Like, maybe the whole concept of how they came to still be alive is a little bit like hand-wavy, vague, whatever. I'll give Rick a pass on that. I already have. Otherwise I wouldn't have made it through 5 books of this. But we basically come onto this series with pre-existing notions of these 3 characters. And it's a little bit like, you know, if anywhere Hera is mentioned, you assume, oh, she's gonna be a bitch, because that's what we know of Hera, right? But these three are actual historical figures that I've learned about in school, so I had sort of expectations of them, right? So Commodus felt very much like, you know, a second Apollo, in a sense. Like, he was arrogant, he was a douchebag, he was just so into himself. So I didn't particularly consider him, you know, that intimidating, really. Like, I wasn't really scared of him for the most part. But funnily enough, the one I was freaking terrified by was Caligula, because Caligula is sort of infamous. Like, of course we all know about Nero and the, you know, burning of Rome and the fiddling and whatever, but Caligula was just batshit crazy, basically. That's kind of what we know of him. So for some reason, when the triumvirate was coming together, I just always felt like Caligula was going to be like the toughest to deal with, because he was so nuts. And Nero, yeah, I mean, he was he was intimidating, but I also thought Nero was probably going to be like the smartest out of all of them. And I thought that the smartest would mean that, being the smartest would mean that he wasn't necessarily as out there as the other two. So when Nero was set up to be the big bad out of the three of them, I was like, okay, it makes sense in one hand, but on the other hand, I kind of expected the climax of the series to then like fall a bit flat, because I'm like, Nero's not going to be that grandiose about everything, right? Like, yeah, he might burn the city down, that was kind of a given, because that's exactly what he did to Rome, but like, I just didn't think he had that flair, you know, that the other two had, and that Caligula could like seriously just go full psycho, whereas I didn't think Nero would. Nero would be more calm and calculated and cold and that sort of thing. The thing with Nero, though, is that his whole beast shtick was actually creepy AF. You know, that was the thing that really chilled me to the bone with Nero. And this is because the characters that if you've seen any of my videos in the past, the characters that I more like gutturally hate tend to be characters that are terrible fathers. There's the obvious Gendo Ikari, of course, who is basically my most hated character of all time. There's Viren from the Dragon Prince. Those sort of like parents that are not only like awful human beings, they're cold, but they're also so manipulative. You know, like, they will destroy your life and convince you that it was your fault that you destroyed your life. Like, they're experts at gaslighting, and I hate that viscerally. Like, I just absolutely hate it. And Nero was that, especially in this book, because we got to see him interact more with Meg and with the other kids that he was grooming to be little psychopaths as well. And that chilled me to the bone. So I went from somebody who was thinking that Nero was going to be like your average, you know, evil mastermind type of big bad, to somebody that I really, really like provoked these feelings of disgust and just the way he manipulated Meg. It was so it's like, it's abuse in the worst possible meaning of the word, and I hated him so much. So I actually, it turned out that Nero was a better big bad than I was expecting because he was such a terrible human being. Basically. So yeah, that was actually something that I really loved from this book. I mean, I didn't love him as a character, I loved that they made me hate him as much as I did. So it's good. Also, can I just say, I love that they included Rachel in the quest, and that she was badass, and that the blue hairbrush had a resurgence, because the blue hairbrush is legendary, let's face it. I mean, it wasn't as grand as, you know, throwing it in the face of the Lord of the Titans or whatever, but like the blue hairbrush came back. I love it. I love that callback. I love that Rachel thought, I love that she wasn't just some damsel in distress, because there's this whole thing where she's like, oh, she's mortal, she doesn't have any powers, she's not a demigod, whatever, so what is she gonna do in the front lines? And they do that with Will too, and I really like that neither of them stay behind this time. Like, they may not be like super strong fighters, but they can help, so let them help. I like that. On the other side of the spectrum, there's just Nico being badass and saving everyone's asses repeatedly. That is all. I love that. I love him. I think Nico is so amazing. He's come from like he's come back from so much pain and still manages to be, a decent person and a freaking amazing hero. Because seriously, how many times did he save Lester or the others at like the last possible second? And it was, there's that trope on TV tropes that's called the big damn heroes moment. Nico, over and over again in this book. It was amazing. And just there's one passage that I would like to read, because it's just a description of Nico that I thought was just really, it hit me really hard, because Nico is he's been through so much, and this just summarized everything, and Nick and Rick just put it all so clearly. So this is from chapter 10. He was deceptively quiet. He appeared anemic and frail. He kept himself in the periphery. But Will was right about how much Nico had been through. He had been born in Mussolini's Italy. He had survived decades in the time warp reality of the Lotus Casino. He'd emerged in modern times disoriented and culture shocked, arrived at Camp Half-Blood, and promptly lost his sister Bianca to a dangerous quest. He had wandered the labyrinth in self-imposed exile, being tortured and brainwashed by a malevolent ghost. He'd overcome everyone's distrust and emerged from the Battle of Manhattan as a hero. He'd been captured by giants during the rise of Gaia. He'd wandered Tartarus alone and somehow managed to come out alive. And through it all, he'd struggled with his upbringing as a conservative Catholic Italian male from the 1930s, and finally learned to accept himself as a young gay man. Anyone who could survive all of that had more resilience than Stygian iron. It's true. It's true, and I love Nico. I know that he's become a lot of people's favorites. He's not my favorite personally, but I love him either way, and I can recognize that he's been through so much, and in this book it really felt like Nico had grown up. How Percy sort of became the leader of the camp? Nico feels like that now, and I really like it, and I'm so happy for him. I do hope we get to see him, like more of him, and we'll talk about that later. But I just wanted to say that Nico was badass in this book. I love it, and I'm so glad that Rick included him in this book. Also, I will seriously miss the arrow of Dodona. Like, I love that arrow. It's so dumb, but I love it. And the thing is that I also really, really love that it was quite literally the arrow of Dodona that gave the killing blow, basically. Because, like, we've spent 5 books saying do not use the arrow of Dodona to actually fight. So of course the arrow was going to be the one that actually killed Python. I love it, but I will also miss it. So yeah, that kind of sucks. Also, I love the Apollo kids so much. Like, I love them so much. I love them so much that I have now officially changed my godly affiliation to Apollo. Because initially, when I was starting to read the Percy Jackson books, I did like a quiz, like a BuzzFeed quiz. It wasn't BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed didn't exist back then, but like a BuzzFeed type quiz somewhere on the internet to like tell me what my godly parent was, and I got Zeus, and that made a lot of sense because I identify a lot with Talia right? So that always made sense to me. So I've always been like, oh, Sue's cabin, for sure. That's my thing. Not anymore. I'm totally an Apollo kid. I'm just saying, I love those Apollo kids so much. Like, mainly Will, and I will talk about Will later, but mainly Will. But Kayla and Austin are also pretty darn amazing. I love that they were like playing past the Apollo in this book. Like, that made me laugh so much. But they're just great, and they're a large part of the reason why, you know, the Hidden Oracle is my second favorite Trials of Apollo book, and a large part of the reason why this one is my third favorite, because I love those Apollo kids so much, and I love that we get to meet them and we get to interact with them directly, and we get to actually examine their feelings for their father. So I really like that, and I really love Lee Fletcher for no reason at all, except that he doesn't get nearly enough love from this fandom, and I don't know why. Lee Fletcher was awesome. Can we just give Lee some love, please? Anyway, let us talk about William Andrew Solace, MD. Can I just, like, here's the thing about Will. Much like with the Seuss cabin, Apollo cabin situation, for the longest time, Percy Jackson has been my favorite character of this Riordan-verse type universe. That had a lot to do with the fact that he was the narrator in the first five books, so he's the one we know the best, basically, out of all the demigods. And he's just cool, you know. He's funny. He's a down-to-earth kid, and you know he's just a regular kid, and I like that. But he's also brave as hell, and you know he's a hero, and he's good, and I like that. So I love Percy. I may love Will more than Percy. That is a big thing for me to say. But Will Solace, since the moment he popped up in Blood of Olympus, that kid just stole my heart. I'm just saying. I love Will so much. I think he's so good and so brave, and he's not a fighter, but he has a very good sense of right and wrong. He wants to help people, which for me is like the biggest thing. He's just so soft and sweet and brilliant, and I love him. I love him so much. And I haven't had the opportunity to be in his head like I was with Percy, but I don't think I need it. I genuinely think that I love Will Solace more than any other character in this entire series. And I may be the only person in the world who's saying that, but Will is my child. I'm just saying, like, I love that kid. I love him so much, and I want all the best for him, and I want him to be around forever. I love him. I love him. That is all. So let me just say some of the things that made this book even better, because it featured Will in a protagonist sort of position, or at least a very strong supporting, you know, turn. And he was so cool in this book, because normally we get Will like on the outskirts of everything because he's not a fighter precisely. So, you know, Blood of Olympus was fun because we got to actually meet him for the first time, and then the Hidden Oracle, we actually got to interact with him for the first time, like directly, like as a person, not in battle kind of thing. And I really like that. But this book made him a badass. Can I just say, I think Will is a badass, and if I hear anybody else complaining that Will isn't cool because he can only heal and he can't fight, we're gonna have words. Okay, I'm just saying, we're gonna have words. So here are some of the things that I really loved about Will in this book. First, I want to read a passage, and it's from a scene. From the scene where Lester and Will first see each other when Lester gets back to camp, and Apollo just describes him, and that was the first moment where it hit me, like, oh, Will, that's right, I love you so much and I had missed you so much. So I just want to read it. Dad! Will shot to his feet. He ran down the steps and tackled me in a hug. That's when I lost it. I wept openly. My beautiful son, with his kind eyes, his healer's hands, his stone-warm demeanor. Somehow, he had inherited all my best qualities and none of the worst. Yeah, that's Will. That's Will in a nutshell. He's everything that is good about Apollo and nothing that is bad about Apollo. Basically, it's such perfection in just one short description that I felt all the feelings when I read that. Like, I literally had to pause and go, because I love Will so much, and this is everything. You know, that is exactly who Will is, and that's exactly why I love him, and that is exactly why I praised him so much. Also, and I'm gonna read again because there are 3 scenes that I actually told myself I was going to read. This is the 3rd one, which also gave me feels. This is from chapter 16. When Will glows, basically. And, you know, the only one who knew that he could glow was Nico, and everybody else is like, you know, Pikachu emoji. And Apollo just sort of reacts to that. I'm so proud, I said. Will's face turned the color of sunlight shining through a glass of cranberry juice. Dad, I'm just glowing. I'm not graduating at the top of my class. I'll be proud when you do that too, I assured him. How cute are they? I love them! And I'm such a sucker for like actual good parent Apollo. I'm such a sucker for that because I think these kids deserve, like, all of them, not just the Apollo kids, but like all the demigods. They deserve better parents than they've got. Let's face it, the gods are assholes. And one of the things about Trials of Apollo that was nice is not just that Apollo was realizing that he shouldn't be an asshole, it was also that these kids had a chance to experience having an actual parent who actually cared. You know, like an actual godly parent that actually cared. And I really, really love that. And I love that Rick included that bit because, yeah, Will deserves it. Like, honestly, like, all the kid needs to do is breathe. And I'm like, I'm so proud of you, baby. You know, so like, of course, Apollo is super proud of him. He's literally what every Apollo kid should be. And I love him. I love him so much, but not just those 2 scenes. Like there's a ton of scenes that just Will just kind of steals for no reason at all. Like, you know, when he gets to like Nero's throne room and that whole badass boast about how no one hits his boyfriend or kills his dad. Like, hi there, boss man. Didn't know you had it in you. I love that he can get to like use this like head doctor, head medic voice and everybody just pays attention. Like everything just stops. It's amazing. Also, I really love the fact that, like, the general fact that he's a giant worrywart, because that's exactly who I thought he would be. Of course. He's also a Star Wars geek! Freak! I love you so fucking much! Oh my god, like, that made my whole life. It's hilarious, because you know how when you're reading a book sometimes and something, like, really emotional happens, and you sort of have to, like, stop and take a breath? Like, it's happened a few times to me, like I had to, like, stop and I remember when I was reading Deathly Hallows, the time when Ron came back to the trio was really emotional to me. Like, I had to pause so I could cry. When Beth died in Little Women, that sort of stuff. When Max died in Catching Fire, I actually threw my book at the wall. Well, I had a bit of a moment here with Will, but it wasn't like an emotionally charged moment. It wasn't like anybody was dying. It was just when it was revealed that he's a Star Wars geek. I closed my book. I was just like sitting there like, oh my god. oh my god, like I thought I was gonna start crying. And I'm not a crier. That doesn't really happen all that often. It happened those 2 times that I mentioned, but like overall, I tend not to cry. But that hit me really hard. Because I'm like, I already loved Will as much as I thought I did. I did not think that I could love him anymore. And then Rick threw that curveball at me. And it's like the perfection. You know, and I just, Will, man, Will, what do I do with that kid? Like, I love him so much. My love knows no bounds. Protect Will at all costs. I adore him. I adore him. I didn't think it was possible that I could love any character in the series as much as I love Percy, but Will just jumped above Percy, like, by a lot. So I'm just saying, I may be the only person in the universe who actually feels this way. Because I know people like Will. He's not usually in people's like favorites list, but for me he is. He's the best character in this whole goddamn series, and I love him. I love him so much. And Rick made him a Star Wars geek. Oh, it's like he's writing these things with me in mind, basically. Like, now let's talk about the ships, because of course we have to talk about the ships, okay? So this book, ladies and gentlemen, is basically like Death by Solangelo, pretty much. Like, can we talk about how many moments they had in this book? Because I'm like, if I thought Hidden Oracle was going to be the death of me, I did not know what was coming. Because I really like this thing. Like all the moments they had in this, like little moments, not even like big things, but I mean they had some big things, but like even little moments, like Nico smiling when Will flirts with him, which he totally does. The fact that Will just knows all his habits so well. The whole thing with the cheese whiz plant in Venezuela. Somebody freaking write a fanfic about that now. And also, can I just say that yes, that means that Will doesn't just forbid Nico from shadow traveling, thank you very much. Like some people, you know, in the fandom just rolled with this idea that Will just outright forbids Nico from shadow traveling because it's too dangerous and he's paranoid about that. And I like that this proves that he doesn't, because that doesn't sound like Will. Like, I know he would worry every time Nico shadow travels, basically. I get it. But he would be like, no, you can't do that anymore. You know, you're gonna die. Because that power is also part of Nico, right? So he wouldn't be so harsh about it. You know? Like, he has his own powers. So has Nico. So I like the idea that this sort of suggests that they've shadow traveled together before. So maybe either Will was like helping him, you know, practice shadow traveling so he could like get back up to snuff from the last time that he tried it, or you know, Nico's fine and dandy and they just shadow travel places to go on dates or something. I think that's kind of cool. Like, either one I'll take, but I love that Will isn't like a shadow travel Nazi or something. Or however you want to call it, because things got pretty ugly for a while in fanfiction. Like, they would have these big blow-ups because of shadow traveling, and I'm like, Will wouldn't do that. I mean, I'm not saying if you wrote a fanfic about this that it's bad or anything. Some of them are really well written. I just don't feel like Will would do that in the way I sort of interpreted his character. So, you know, it's nice to see that Rick feels that way as well. So that's good. I love the fact that Nico has told Will at least a little bit of what he's been through, if not everything. And I like that Will has encouraged him to get help somehow from whoever can help him, even if it isn't himself. So this whole thing with Mr. D I thought was very nice. Which, by the way, can I just say that I'm kind of creeped out by the fact that I like Mr. D in this book. It's weird, but yeah, he was actually kind of nice, so I like that. And I like that he's sort of trying to help Nico in whatever way he can, because I guess demigods don't believe in therapy? like actual therapy. So I don't know, I guess Mr. D is the closest thing he can get, whatever. And I like that Will encourages him to actually get help, because yeah, Nico could use some help to deal with all this stuff. He doesn't have to deal with it alone anymore. Also, just their whole argument in the troglodytes cave, where Apollo is sort of listening from afar, so he can't really get all the details. He just sees them like gesticulating and whatever, and then he just interprets it as Will like worrying the entire time and Nico being like, whatever, which I thought was like super funny. I love it. And at the end, you know, holding hands by the fire. They're so cute. I love them. I love them. Yeah, this is another one of those things where they've just taken over my life, you know, like for the longest time Percy and Annabeth were like the main OTP for this entire universe. Nico and Will have gone way past that right now. Like, they're my favorites. I love them so much, and it's just so they're so cute. Like, seriously, they can never break up. Rick, I hope you know this. I will repeat it again later, but they can never break up. That's As for the rest of them, it was nice to see how everybody ended, so to speak, though I don't think it's really the end, and I will talk about that later, as I said. But I like to see how our other ships are doing. Like, Frank and Hazel just continue to be adorable, which I just... Of course. Leo and Calypso are still kind of figuring their shit out. Which honestly, I feel it's kind of realistic, because I mean, I know a lot of people were put off by the way the relationship just sort of happened by default and whatever. I liked them for the most part. Like, I thought they made a nice team, and I thought they really cared about each other a lot. But there's that whole thing with Calypso like being cursed to fall in love with every hero that lands in Ogygia and whatever. So, you know, it's very realistic that she thinks she needs some space to sort of see if her feelings for him are real, and he's not happy about it, but what is he gonna do, you know? So I think that's kind of realistic. And I was also kind of glad to see Reina and Leo be friendly. Like, we've seen a little bit of that, but not enough, and I think they would like be really good friends. Because, let's be real, Leo needs someone to knock him around every once in a while. And I've been griping about the whole Mamacita thing for years, because let's face it, that's sexist. It's very sexist. Like, if you're not married to the person, you don't call them Mamacita. That's not... It's very disrespectful. So I was glad to finally see someone point it out to him, and, you know, you gotta learn, Leo, so that's good. I like that they're friends. That's super fun. Percy and Annabeth finally getting the respite they deserve. I really feel good for them that way, and it made me laugh that Rick had to like make sure to state that they are in separate dorms and those dorms are not co-ed. Like, come on, Rick, we all know they're totally doing it. Like, we all know it. Come on. So that was hysterical, but you know, this is middle grade, so I guess he has to say it. And I also, this is not a ship, but I do also have to mention that I thought it was lovely to see it right there in black and white, to have Rick honor Jason as the best of them. I thought that was really emotional, and it was really important to me, because, you know, Jason was never my favorite at any point. He was always kind of just there for the most part, but he grew on me so much through Heroes of Olympus, especially in House of Hades, with the way he supported Nico. Jason grew so much on me, and I don't think he deserved at all the amount of flack that the fandom gave him, simply because he wasn't Percy. He was accused of being a Gary Stu, that he was too powerful, blah 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 blah. And yeah, okay, I can see some of that, but that doesn't mean he's a bad guy just because he's Percy. He's not Percy. And I think Jason was a great guy. And I think when you have characters that are good, even though they may not be the most interesting person around, you don't have to throw vitriol at them. So I really felt for Jason, and I think Rick tried his best to make him somewhat interesting, and you know, to make him grow to some extent through the series. And it did hurt me a lot to see him die, and I hope that the fandom learned a lesson there. You know, I really do hope that, and I hope that people have grown to see Jason in a more sympathetic view, because I think he deserved it. He was a good guy, and he helped a lot. He sacrificed himself for the greater good, and I think that alone, you know, makes him a cut above the rest in a way. But I am glad, and I was worried about this. I was worried that Nico being involved more in this plot for this book would mean that somehow it had something to do with Jason coming back. I'm glad it wasn't that way, and I'm glad that Rick basically said as much, like stated as much in this book, that Jason is not coming back, because I think it would have cheapened his sacrifice. You know, and it hurt me to see him die. But I like I said at the beginning, I like that it raises the stakes, because we've gone so far. It's been, what, 14 books, no, 13 books with no one dying, basically. I mean, Bianca, but like, she was meant to die from the get-go, I guess. But none of the main characters that we actually get attached to that survive for more than one book, none of them have actually died. And I think it's important to have stakes. And it sucks that it had to be Jason, but once that's done, I don't think it's a good thing to undo it. Even if you technically can, because of the way the universe is set up, and you know, Hazel's already come back and stuff, so like it's not impossible, but I would rather they don't. So yeah, I was glad to see Jason honored in this book. We even got to see him for a little bit in Apollo's dream, which I thought was super sweet, and I was glad for that. I was glad. I really like Jason. No, he's grown on me so much, and I really hope that I mean, I haven't checked because I've been avoiding spoilers, but I really hope that this means that the fandom sort of accepts him a little bit more, because he was pretty bad for a while there, especially after the lost hero, you know? So I guess we'll see. And now, can I just... I'm sort of going into this a lot deeper than I thought it would originally, because I didn't get to do a review of The Burning Maze, and I feel like I have to talk about this now, so not only Jason, but also Piper as well. And as far as Piper goes, I actually adored her ending. I'm very glad to see that she's moving on, because I think that she really deserves it. She's been through a lot herself, and she doesn't have the, let's say, the stability of having been at camp for a long time, like Percy and Annabeth do, for example. So she was going to end up outside of camp, and I guess that means that she had to sort of learn to move on her own without the help of anybody, any other demigods around her. And I'm glad to see that she's starting to. Now, I shipped her with Jason, and I still do for the most part. I mean, sorry, Shell, I'm sure you're lovely, but I don't really know anything about you, so I'm not gonna get necessarily excited about your relationship with Piper. So I did ship her with Jason for the most part, and I still do. But here's the thing, I do think it's realistic that not everybody meets the person that they'll be with for the rest of their lives in their teenage years. It's not a thing. And yeah, it's true that demigods have a shorter lifespan because of the monsters and whatever. So yeah, they may be a little bit more likely, but not every couple can last, right? So I knew this, and I had internalized it for a long time, so it wasn't Jason and Piper's breakup that bothered me so much as the fact that she was questioning whether her feelings for him were real or not. Which, yeah, I get it. Here as a manipulative bitch who does this stuff, and you couldn't be sure given how it all started, but it still sort of hurts because everything they went through together afterwards was real. And that's where I feel like they actually truly fell in love. It wasn't because they were in love in that bus in The Lost Hero, it was everything after that. And it kind of sucks that it seemed like she didn't feel that way, And also, because Jason died and it hit me so hard, I kind of wish that he could have died knowing that he had truly loved and been loved in return. It's just, I kind of wish that was something that he had when he died. Now, I'm not saying she owed him anything or that they would have stayed together forever, but I wish if he had to die, that he had done so knowing that she had realized that she really did love him. Unfortunately, sometimes life doesn't work out that way, I guess, so I have to live with that, but it does hurt a little bit when I think about it. Moreover, Piper's ending also adds an extra layer to this whole thing that I really like, because the fact that Piper's also attracted to girls doesn't necessarily just excuse everything I just said. It doesn't excuse the fact that she was confused about how her relationship with Jason started, but it kind of might explain a lot of it. I wasn't shocked that Piper's bisexual or pansexual or however she identifies. It's a pretty recurrent headcanon in the fandom since she made her appearance, and honestly, as far as I'm concerned, I'm inclined to think that most, if not all, of Aphrodite's kids are probably not picky about the gender of their romantic partners. Let's face it. In fact, one of the things that's bugged me the most in the Riordan verse, and there's not a lot of things that bug me, but there are a few. One of the things that bug me the most is that we haven't really seen Aphrodite take on female lovers. And I know that's got to do with the fact that there's just not a lot of that in mythology. I can't off the top of my head think of a female lover of Aphrodite's, whereas I could point to Zeus's male lovers and Apollo's male lovers, but with Aphrodite it just didn't come up as much. But you'd think Rick would mention it at some point. After all, love is love, and love is kind of Aphrodite's brand, right? So that's kind of a glaring absence for me, and I like that Piper, who is the one Aphrodite kid that we know the best, basically, kind of brought that to the forefront with her own struggles with her sexuality. And that's why I say that Piper's newfound sexual orientation explains a lot of things, because that could mean that when she said she wasn't sure if her relationship with Jason was real, it wasn't solely about Hera's meddling, and it wasn't that she didn't feel the feelings, she didn't feel a bond with him. She could just be confused about her sexuality, It makes a lot of sense. Is she a lesbian and her feelings for Jason are just friendshipy? Or is there some heteronormative part of her brain that was making her feelings for him seem more than they truly were, because it just made sense for the two of them to be a couple, as I assume that is pretty much what Hera was going for, because that lady is old school when it comes to relationships? Or is she maybe bisexual or pansexual and she did truly love Jason, she just needs to come to grips with the fact that she can fall in love with other genders as well? I like that it gives her confusion a subtle complexity, because it means that she's not just stuck on the way their relationship started and not taking into account everything they lived once they realized they'd been tricked. So it's not all about you, Hera, take that. But it's about her, and her orientation when it comes to romantic partners, and whether or not the feelings, the bond that she felt with Jason was actually romantic in nature, or whether it was friendship, brotherly, you name it. It was her trying to define from her orientation what those feelings meant. separately. And for that, she needed to be apart from him. You know, because otherwise she would just keep feeling the same things and not knowing what that meant. So she had to define that before she could actually tell him for sure that she really did love him, or that it was just a confusing thing that she was going through. So I like that. It makes me feel a little bit better about the fact that Jason died while they were broken up, because I you know, the way she reacted after he died, I really do think she loved him. And I'm not saying that she can't fall in love with Cheryl, like, Godspeed, I hope they're happy. But also, it could just be that she's, you know, 16 and she has to, like, go through a lot of relationships before she finds the one. So, you know, I don't mind, and I think it makes a lot of sense for her as a character. And I like that Rick finally declared it, you know. And it's interesting because I don't think, I mean, there haven't been any bisexual or pansexual characters other than the gods. Like, no demigods that we've known. So, like, either they're straight or they're gay. There's nothing in between. And it was about time, I think. So that's good. And Piper does make the most sense. You know? Because, like, Frank and Hazel are totally getting married. Don't at me. They're totally getting married. But I can see it from them because Hazel is a 1940s kid. So, of course, it makes sense for her to meet the person she's gonna marry at 14. Of course it does. And Frank is just like, he's sweet and he's old school. He was raised by his grandma. So, yeah, they seem like the type to be like childhood sweethearts, right? Everybody else, probably not. Except Will and Nico, who have to live together forever and into this life and the next one and the next one, because I say so. I'm just saying. So, since I'm on that, I'm gonna just talk a little bit about the future and speculation about what's coming up for the series. Now, when it comes to Nico and Will, I'm just gonna say it straight off the bat. I am 100% convinced that Rick has got more to come when it comes to the two of them. Despite the fact that Tower of Nero is being billed as the last of the series that started with Percy Jackson, I think he's left too many loose ends when it comes to Nico and, you know, Tartarus and the voices that he was hearing. And Rick wouldn't do that unless he's planning something. We know this because we've read 3 series of his as it stands, and he's done the same thing in all of them. And then there was more to come. So he wouldn't do this unless he's planning something already. Now, we know for sure that he's working on something that has to do with Irish mythology, which I admittedly don't know much about. I know very little about Irish mythology. Like, Greek and Roman was always more my thing. But there's always a chance that this new series could be taking place in the same Riordan verse, you know, like the King Chronicles and Magnus Chase did. And even if it doesn't, like, even if it's a completely separate thing, it's not uncommon for Rick to be working on 2 different projects at the same time. He has published 2 books for 2 different series in 1 year in the past. So he did that with Trials of Apollo and Magnus Chase. So it's not unreasonable to think that he might work on the Irish thing and do a Nico, like, side thing at the same time. Now, I don't know if this Nico thing is going to, like, be connected at all to the Irish mythology thing. Like, maybe Nico just comes across some Irish demigods or whatever it is that they're called. I don't know. Like, I would assume it's like fairies or whatever, but like I've stated, I know very little about Irish mythology. Anyway, I don't know if it's gonna be that Nico connects to that somehow, or if it's just Nico will have his own series, or whether it's a book or a companion book or like a short story or something, but something is coming. And if it involves Nico and Will, I am absolutely in. As long as he doesn't break them up, because if that ever happens, I am disowning him and burning his effigy. I'm kidding. Maybe. But seriously, never break them up. Never. ever, that's not a thing that you can do. Thank you, Rick. Love you. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about this book. I will stay tuned to news from Rick. I would assume that if the Irish myth thing is coming relatively soonish, because he tends to like release books in May and October when he releases 2 of them. So May and October, we might be getting news about the mythology book soonish. I think maybe before the end of the year or at the start of 2021, if it's releasing in May, for example. So I look forward to that, but I fully expect there to be something to do with Nico and Will after this, because yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I had to say about this book. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it's not my favorite out of the series, but I think it was good. I think it's one that's going to stay with me, and I really loved that we got to see the endings for pretty much everybody else. And I like the fact that, as Rick said, Percy and Annabeth are now 18, and it's time to sort of let them go off and make their own lives and stuff. But, you know, the others, they can still be around. I wouldn't be mad if they show up from time to time somewhere. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I like seeing them finally come to a place where they feel like they can be happy and lead good lives without having to worry about some giant evil coming to destroy the earth. One thing that I'm kind of sad about is that I was hoping that Apollo would sort of take Mr. D's place and maybe like stay as the camp leader, I guess. That didn't happen. Totally trolled. But it's nice, you know, it's nice that Apollo did what he had to do, and yeah, Mr. D doesn't get off that easy, I guess. Oops. I don't know, I kind of like that idea though, so maybe somebody write fanfic about it, like when the 100 years are over for Mr. D, maybe Apollo comes back and like takes his place or something. That would be nice. I think that would be a good thing to do. So yeah, I'm gonna miss these characters. I don't think we'll just immediately like forget about all of them. I think some of them will come back, as I said. We don't know yet when or if that will happen, but I hope so. Fingers crossed. I really do hope that Rick has something up his sleeve, because otherwise there are a lot of hanging threads here, and that's kind of very trolly. So I hope that he has somewhere he's going with this. In the meantime, we have a lot of stuff to look forward to from him, because in case you didn't know, from a blog post that he made, he's creating his own producing firm. Like, it's called Mythomagic Inc., which, by the way, I love that name. I love that name so much. Mythomagic Inc. is going to be producing all of the adaptations for Rick's IPs, his series. Whether it's the Percy Jackson series on Disney Plus or the Kane Chronicles movies on Netflix or whatever it is that eventually comes from this. I do hope if the Percy Jackson series actually takes off, that it veers into Heroes of Olympus and Trials of Apollo, because I need to see Will and Nico like together on screen, like right now. So y'all better watch that shit. I'm just saying. You better watch that show. I am definitely like, I don't subscribe to Disney Plus, but I will for that. So it better be good. I'm just saying. And you know, Rick and Becky are sort of guarding it now that they're actually formally producers of the thing. So I have high hopes for that. And when that starts rolling, you know, when they say that they've been working on scripts so far, because Becky, by the way, if you aren't following at Camp Half-Blood on Twitter, do, because Becky gives us more information than Rick does about any of this. So like, if Becky said that they're working on scripts, which I think is great, and when they start casting and when there's something announced, I'll definitely be back here to talk about it, because I love these characters and I love this world, and I'm so excited to finally see it get another adaptation because it really needed it. I don't mind the movies. I actually quite like the Percy Jackson movies. I'm aware that I'm the only person in the world who feels this way, but I actually really love the movies. But of course the books are better, and I'm glad they're getting a second chance because I think they could go far this time if it's well done. So we'll see, but I'll be back then once something is announced. You can be sure of that because I'm super excited about it. And yeah, that's about it for this review today. I've been talking for a long time. I have a lot of feelings about the Riordan-verse. What can I say? So yeah, that's about it for me today. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you like my stuff, please subscribe to my channel. I'm always happy to see people liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. You know, it makes my day, it helps me with the algorithms, and it gives me people to chat with about these things. Like, what did you think about this book? Are you as excited about everything that's happening in the Riordan-verse as I am? Tell me what you think. Let's just chat. So please do that in the comments below, or you know, however. You can also find me on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at girlsareweird with underscores between the words, and I am on Tumblr at girlsareweird with hyphens between the words. You can find a Facebook page for this vlog at facebook.com/FreakingNarnia, and as usual, be sure to visit my main website at FreakingNarnia.com. All my videos are up there in case you missed any and want to catch up. You just have to go and look it up, and it's all in there. Also remember that I have a Redbubble store where I make art based on my favorite quotes from my favorite fandoms, and then you can use that art to print on different types of merchandise such as hats and t-shirts and computer covers, that sort of stuff. So be sure to check it out and maybe purchase something if you're in the mood. It really does help me a lot. If you like to have these videos on podcast form, then what you want to do is go to my Patreon and subscribe to my Patreon, where for a very, very small sum of money each month, you'll be able to gain access to these episodes as podcasts on the exact same day they go up on YouTube. So be sure to do that. It helps me out. And yeah, I think that's about it for me today. I will see you guys next time with another video from all the way in freaking Narnia. Will, I love you. Riggs, what's his name? Fuck, what's his name? To see, with the Percy Jackson movies, actually,